Good evening, everyone. And let's begin our talk. Am I coming through? It says that I'm muted here. Don't worry. No, it's all good. That's speaking up there. Okay. I've got my technical backup here, operator. So, all right. Prayer. O Heavenly King, Comforter, Spirit of Truth, God everywhere present and fills all things. Treasury of blessings, the giver of life, come and abide in us and cleanse us from every impurity and save our souls a good one. Right. So tonight we have a number of topics, which I'll first list, and then we will start reading the actual gospel text and commentaries. So we have a review of the topic of gospel chronology, presentation. Second section, Christ in Capernaum after his journey to the land of the Gadarenes, and that there are several stories here, or about three or four. Firstly, the healing of the woman with an issue of blood, and raising of the young girl, daughter of Jairus, the chief of the synagogue. And then we've got healing of the two blind men and the mute demoniac, and the mission of the 12 disciples. Now, the last topic is fairly substantial, and we'll only cover the first part of it tonight. We'll run out of time. So, yes, so let's have a look at this topic of gospel chronology. Now, at the beginning of our gospel series, I said that we would be following a chronological, the chronological principle of presentation of, in parallel of the four gospels. By the way, what I'd like to do is to go back later when we've got some time, and maybe Chris can help me. I think we should number the actual talk, so that for reference later on, because I remember back in 1984-85, I did about 60 lectures on the four Gospels in a small group. I don't know how many we've got now, but I suspect we may have even more than 60 the way it's going by the time we finish. So it might be helpful to have a numbering system, a reference system, and make sure we preserve the recordings. Who knows, it might be beneficial to people later on, and look at it again. Yes. So this is the way, the chronological approach is the usual way that the gospel is studied in seminaries. This was my own experience in Jordanville. This is the way that the textbook that we used, the Archbishop of America's textbook, which is now available in English. At that time it wasn't. And when I was doing those talks or lectures back in the mid-80s, I used the textbook of Archbishop of America as a kind of a base of reference point. But I don't expect people to get a copy of it. So, it just has to be a bit simpler. We were a bit more ambitious in those days, and I got my students to do little weekly quizzes on the work we've done. It's a bit difficult to do it. This is the way we're doing it online. Right. Yes. So the textbook, Archbishop Avericus Textbooks, has its own chronology, and I'm using a slightly different pattern of chronology, but you see, I would like to point out that while every one of the four Gospels has its own internal chronological principle. Hello, Carol. It's lovely to have, even a couple of other people present. So we've got a little audience. I will speak about that when we finish. Yes. So as I was saying, while every one of the four Gospels follows a basic chronological principle in presenting the Gospels. The Gospels are not just a story. They're not just a biography of Christ. No, no, no. There's a big difference because they're a lot more than that. The Gospels are a revelation about the triune God who sends his only begotten Son, perfect God and perfect man, to save fallen humanity from death as disconnection from God. That's what the gospel is about. It's not about the story of some exceptional man known as Jesus Christ. And for that reason, while I was preparing this talk, it occurred to me that the four Gospels could be considered as a kind of a musical piece, a kind of a poem sung in four-voice harmony. Now, those who understand music, especially European four-part harmony, singing, they can appreciate what I'm talking about, because every one of those voices follows and is connected to the other voices, but they are different, slightly different melodies, and there's a different relationship, right? But together they produce a beautiful piece. And the gospel really is one gospel, even though there are four voices here. All right. Now, when we began, I think I may have used, and I tend to talk about it in those terms, that when you come into a church, you see the four evangelists inside, and they're looking at the central icon of Christ. Well, there it is in the uppermost part of the nave. So yes, here we go. Oh, there's the icon of Christ. That's a 3-meter face there, right? But Chris, yes, show the pendants, which are the corners with the evangelists. There they are. Yes, Chris is just going around the right. So when we began, I said that visually, an Orthodox church talks about the gospel through this composition of Christ in the middle with the four evangelists around him. They're like having different views of Christ. But now I'm giving you a musical model. So it's one gospel sung together. Right. So the four gospels are really one harmonious song about Christ the Savior. But each one of each part of this song has its own pattern. So the first attempt to present the content of the full Gospels together in one text was actually made in the 2nd century by a well-known Christian apologist. These apologists were people who generally were educated people who attempted to defend Christian faith before the pagans or Roman authorities. Some of the apologies were presented to the emperor himself. And this was Tatian, who was an Assyrian, so a Middle Eastern man. He was baptized in Rome, but he wrote this work which is called Diatessaron. And it was used liturgically in the Syriac church, Syrian church, until the 5th century. But then its popularity waned for various reasons. The church everywhere began to use a lectionary similarly to the way that we do it now. I may have mentioned that it was not uncommon in the Middle Ages to come across a lectionary that, like a service gospel that was published according to the sequence of the readings as they were presented from Easter. So when you open the gospel, the first reading, it began with John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. Okay, so this was a common presentation. But now, especially after the invention of printing, it's easy to, and the invention of all sorts of reference things like chapters and verses and, using full punctuation marks and separating the words, not writing them all together. That helps. All right. Now it's easy to just look at any gospels and a service gospel and find the references very quickly. All right, so that's really a little bit of revision because I think I probably have mentioned this before. Okay, so to sum up, the gospel chronology can be divided into 3 sections, logically. So we have the first section, which includes the nativity, the birth of Christ, and the Lord's early years. There's not much there, not much mentioned, just, story in Luke, when he's 12, until we see him in all of the 4 evangelists appearing at the age of 30 at Jordan River. And that is the beginning of the second part. Second part is the longest part, which talks about what he did over 3.5 years of his ministry. Now that finishes the transition. There is the raising of Lazarus. So the raising of Lazarus is an introduction to the last part of the gospel, which talks about Christ's triumphal entry into Jerusalem at Palm Sunday, right? His open declaration of his to the people, even though he didn't say anything, but the way he entered Jerusalem, it became clear to that he was the Messiah, he was the Christ. This is how he was met, because there was a lot of excitement when people found out about the raising of Lazarus, a man who had been dead for 4 days and was beginning to decompose. Wow, what a miracle. Actually, we'll mention Lazarus in passing tonight again. So yes, and that last section, of course, then goes into what we celebrate in Passion Week and the Gospel of also the Pascha of the Cross, and then resurrection, and the stories of his appearances to people, to first of all his disciples, and secondly, we find out from other sources that he actually was seen by hundreds of people who knew him before. 500 people assembled in one spot in Galilee on one occasion. Yeah? Well, they all knew him before. They saw him risen from the dead. It's a lot of witnesses. And finally, the ascension. And this is where we leave the gospel. And the story of the ascension, forms a link to the next book of the New Testament, of course, the book of Acts of the Apostles, written by Luke. All right. So now let's look at the next part, and we've got stories associated with Christ after his journey to the land of the Gadarenes. So let's look at the story of the healing of the woman with an issue of blood, the raising of Jairus' daughter in Luke chapter 8, verses 40 to 56. This is all the stories that we're going to be covering tonight are covered by all the synoptics, three of them, first three, but we will read only one selection, and usually the one that gives more information, and just add some comments about the others. All right, so here we go, ready for to read, to follow from Luke. So it was when Jesus returned that the multitude welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. And behold, there came a man named Jairus, and he was a ruler of the synagogue. And he fell down at Jesus' feet and begged him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter, about 12 years of age, and she was dying. But as he went, the multitudes thronged him. Now a woman having a flow of blood for 12 years, who had spent all her livelihood on physicians and could not be healed by any, came from behind and touched the border of his garment. And immediately her flow of blood stopped. And Jesus said, "Who touched me?" When all denied it, Peter and those with him said, "Master, the multitudes throng and press you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus said, "Somebody touched me, for I perceive power going out from me." Now, when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him. She declared to him in the presence of all the people the reason she had touched him and how she was healed immediately. And he said to her, "Daughter, be of good cheer. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace." Now, while he was still speaking, someone came from the ruler of the synagogue's house, saying to him, "Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher." But when Jesus heard it, he answered him, saying, "Do not be afraid, only believe, and she will be made well." When he came into the house, he permitted no one to go in except for Peter, James, and John, and the father and mother of the girl. Now all wept and mourned for her. But he said, "Do not weep. She is not dead, but sleeping." And they ridiculed him, knowing that she was dead. But he put them all outside, took her by the hand and called, saying, "Little girl, arise." When her spirit returned, then her spirit returned, and she arose immediately. And he commanded that she be given something to eat. And the parents were astonished, but he charged them to tell no one what had happened. Yes, that's there's two stories in one here. No. So all of the synoptics cover these stories, as I said. Now, according to Matthew, Jairus tells Jesus Christ that his daughter was already dead. Yes, if you look at the text, and where we don't really have the time to kind of chop and change between the three synoptics here, but you can check it that this is what is said in Matthew. So according to Matthew, Jairus here was already asking Christ to raise her, while Mark and Luke say that she was close to death, and Jairus was asking for healing. And there's a difference, but sometimes, the evangelists just kind of give a shorter version or summary of the events, and so the end result is not very different here, right? And we have to remember that these are witness accounts and written years, even decades afterwards. So this is why they were writing independently, and there could be little discrepancy between them. Perhaps Jairus's speech was unclear when he said what condition his daughter was in. We must take into account his emotional state. Imagine his only child, a 12-year-old girl. He came rushing to get help from this wonder worker. And she was obviously in the last stages of her agony. Matthew also doesn't mention that, what we heard from Luke here, that messengers came and said to the ruler of the synagogue, Jairus, don't bother to teach it because your daughter's already dead. So it's just a shorter version of the story. That's all it is. That doesn't change the essence very much. Now, imagine how poor Jairus was stressing out. His pleading with Christ to get to his house and heal his daughter. The Lord is surrounded by this huge crowd, a throng of people. It's hard to move through this crowd. They all want to, come close to him, touch him, express their emotions, ask him things. And the story with the woman here delays his progression to the house even more. Now, the woman was embarrassed to tell Christ openly about her problem because, according to the law, she was ritually impure, right? Unclean. But she had a strong faith that all she needed to do was to touch his garments and she would be healed. she was encouraged by this faith to break the law, the ritualist law. Now, Christ says that I felt power coming out of me. Of course, this could not happen without his assent. So, in fact, what happens invisibly and inaudibly is that there is a kind of a conversation between him and this woman, which she doesn't hear. He speaks on a level unknown to anybody around him, and the words that he says to the woman aloud later are really like said to her at the moment where she touches him. But he wants everybody to know about it. The miracle had already happened, but he wanted people to find out the faith of this woman, and that what she did was correct, notwithstanding this business about the law, ritual law of purity. Yes, this is why he says, "Who touched me?" And the apostles are quite incredulous. What are you saying? Who touched me? You're in the middle of a throng. Everybody's pressing against each other and against him too. And he says, that he wanted her to tell her story for the benefit of everybody, and of course for the benefit of future generations, including us. And so then he says, "Be a good daughter, be of good cheer. Your faith has made you well." In the older English, it says, "Your faith has made you whole," doesn't it, Elaine? Your faith has made you whole. Yeah, well, whole is a good word, because the word health comes from whole. When we're unwell, we kind of fragment, we start breaking up. So it's a very good intuition of the ancient language and culture to think of health in those terms of wholeness. And I guess that proper medicine has to be holistic. It has to cover all aspects, not to treat human beings as some sort of mechanisms, mechanical and chemical kind of a phenomenon that you just inject with proper chemicals, fix them up, or do something mechanical like cut something out, or put a titanium part in somewhere, in the hip. It's all mechanical stuff. Yes. It's interesting that Carl Jung said that he felt that a time would come when medicine would operate simply, a bit like the miracles that Christ did. Now, the Lord said that the girl was not dead but sleeping. It's interesting. Why did he say that? The other, I think it's in Matthew, he says that the family had already, they anticipated, the girl, that she would die. So they had already contacted and invited hired mourners, which was the custom in the Middle East and in other cultures. These mourners would come and dramatize, okay? And they were present. So what does this mean, that she was sleeping? Well, first of all, that she's not dead, she's sleeping. First of all, he foretells, he predicts that he will raise her. Secondly, it tells us that bodily death is not the end of everything, that the human soul and spirit have a being, a consciousness outside of the body. So the soul leaves the body, but it is conscious, and it can come back. All right, this is what happens. Bodily death is not a complete destruction of life. And the soul continues living outside of the body. Concerning this expression that he uses here, remember what Christ says to his disciples in chapter 11 of John, when he says, our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him. Now, poor Lazarus was in a deeper state of sleep because his soul had separated from the body for a period of 4 days, and the body was decomposing, beginning to decompose. And one of his sisters says, I love to hear it in the old King James. It says, he stinketh. It is clear that the girl was actually dead. Because those present, including those mourners, began laughing when Jesus said that she's not dead, she's sleeping. She's asleep. There was another reason why he downplayed this, the magnitude of this miracle. We'll see in a minute. So Christ gives the command and the soul comes back into the body. So why does the Lord forbid anyone except the parents and 3 of his disciples, Peter, James, and John, to come into the room where the girl was lying? Nobody else was allowed to witness what had actually happened. Well, the news of such an incredible miracle could create an undesirable enthusiasm. I'm using this word in the old English sense, enthusiasm is like commotion and excitement, zealousness. And an undesirable enthusiasm in the political sense. You remember that all of these people were getting more and more excited about Jesus, that he was possibly the Christ, the Messiah, the King of Israel, he would make Israel into the powerhouse of the world, the center of the world. He would free them from the Romans. And, they all believed it. The disciples believed it until the last moment, until the moment of the ascension. They were still asking, is this what is happening? Yeah. So, see, this overexcitement could work against Christ in the short term. He didn't want this. But remember, I mentioned that this was the reason that he would spend most of the time in in the sticks, in the far province of Galilee. That's why he was dismissed by the intelligentsia of Jerusalem. He's the Samaritan, a hillbilly, right? And that was fine with him. That's what he wanted. These people were more receptive, and going to Jerusalem, if he would provoke his opponents more and more, he did not want to do it. Neither did he want to create hype among the people who supported him and followed him. Okay. Now he also tells those who are present, and mainly, of course, the parents, not to tell anyone. So they weren't allowed to say anything. Okay, and it seems that they kept their promise. Surely we can understand how grateful they would have been, for the return of their only child. So they would have been willing to keep this promise. Okay. So the second reason may have been for Jairus himself, the father, the ruler of the synagogue, because you see, as the head of the synagogue in Capernaum, he knew about a couple of big miracles that happened there in Capernaum already. Like, he was aware of the healing of the paralytic, which we covered before, and the demoniac, and that did not sort of convert him for them, but it was his own need to get help at a critical hour that brought him to Christ. So there you have it. The rumor nevertheless spread over the countryside. Well, you see, the people who were present, who were aware that the girl had actually died, right? They knew about the fact she was dead and then she was alive. But what actually happened was not clear to them. They did not know. And Christ was saying, she's asleep. So, there was a bit of confusion there. So that sort of dampened the whole story a bit. This was the reason that he used those words, to kind of confuse the people a little bit. They knew that some sort of a great miracle occurred, but what exactly happened, well, maybe they weren't sure. Only the parents knew for sure, Peter, James, and John. Okay. Right, so let's have a look at the next topic, the healing of the two blind men and the demoniac. In Matthew now, chapter 9. verses 27 to 35. Matthew chapter 9, verses 27 to 35. All right. When Jesus departed from there, two blind men followed him, crying out and saying, this is immediately after the story of the raising of the girl and the healing of that woman. In Matthew, the story precedes it. So yes, blind men followed him, crying out and saying, Son of David, have mercy on us. And when he had come into the house, the blind men came to him, and Jesus said to them, do you believe that I am able to do this? They said to him, yes, Lord. Then he touched their eyes, saying, according to your faith, let it be to you. And their eyes were opened. And Jesus sternly warned them, saying, see that no one knows it. But when they had departed, they spread the news about him in all that country. Yes, as they went out, these two men, behold, they brought to him a man mute and demon-possessed. And when the demon was cast out, the mute spoke. And the multitudes marveled, saying, it was never seen like this in Israel. But the Pharisees said, he casts out demons by the ruler of the demons. Then Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every sickness and every disease among the people. Okay? So, from Jairus' house, Christ was probably making his way to the house where he would stay whenever he was in Capernaum. And he was spending a lot of his time in Capernaum and traveling from there around the lake, around the Sea of Galilee. In Capernaum, he lived in one house. He stayed with Peter. Peter's house. The two blind men followed him, shouting, have mercy on us, Jesus, thou Son of David. He pretended to ignore them. They kept following him. He wanted to bring them into the house. He did not want to perform this miracle publicly. Okay. I suspect, again, because he just wanted to dampen this excitement among the people. Just wanted to back off from the people. So all of this happens inside the house. They followed him inside. He asked them, do you have faith? Do you believe that I can do it? And when they said yes, then he touched their eyes and healed them. Yes. And then he tells them sternly, he says here, not to tell anyone, but they still spread the news. So I think we covered this before, why he did this. Well, not to create too much excitement. There's another reason for it, and that is, can you imagine a person asks for a miracle, goes away, receiving this great gift, of eyesight. So, because we are who we are in our fallen state, first of all, the sense of gratitude to God is overwhelming. But then something else sits in, our usual sinful self. And the person begins thinking, well, I received this gift because I was worthy of it. I'm saying others don't get receive these gifts, but I did. You see, and so this is why he tells them not to talk about it too much. Another reason that he didn't want people's praise. He was not after that at all. You know, he didn't want to turn into a rock star, you know, in the modern sense. So no sooner these two departed, another man was brought in, mute and possessed by a demon. And when the demon was cast out, he began to speak. And the multitudes marveled, saying that nothing like this had ever happened in Israel. But the Pharisees said that he was using demonic power to expel demons, which is horrific. What a thing to say. Now, later on, now this is chapter 9 of Matthew. In chapter 12, there's a discussion about this sort of thing, where Christ speaks out and he talks about blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. Okay? And we won't talk about it now too much, because it will be covered later in our talks. But I'd like to mention to you that basically this sin against the Spirit is calling the things of God bad and calling evil and sinful things good, right? That is, a terrible and a kind of a satanic thing to say, when it's clear what is what, and yet the person, because of their some vested interest, that's what it is, it's a vested interest. It's more profitable for me to say that white is black, okay, because I get more out of it. See? And Christ said this sin will not be forgiven either in this life or in the afterlife. But then let's get things into perspective. Let's listen to St. Isaac the Syrian, for instance, who says, there is no unforgivable sin except the unrepentant sin. So if someone blasphemed against the Holy Spirit and then repents, of course the person is forgiven. But so it's a state of unrepentance. That's what is not forgiven, because the person doesn't want forgiveness. You know, how can God forgive you if you don't want to be forgiven? If you treat God as an enemy, it doesn't make sense. Because God respects our free will. All right. So, as I said, we're going to talk about this in more detail later. Yes. Right. So now the mission of the 12 disciples. We're just going to say a few things about it, and we're going to be running out of time. Yes. Again, this story is covered by all of the three synoptics, and Matthew connects the story of the mission of the 12 with his previous activity among the people, that he needed to help them. He needed the apostles to help him pass through. That's what it's about. Let's just read the first part here. In Matthew chapter 9, just continues after those two little stories that we just read. Yes. Yes, it actually, yes, from verse 35. Then Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every sickness and every disease among the people. But when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion for them, because they were weary and scattered, like sheep having no shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest truly is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. And he chooses the 12 disciples. And when he had called his 12 disciples to him, he gave them power over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal all kinds of sicknesses, all kinds of disease. Now, the names of the 12 apostles are these. First, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, Philip and Bartholomew. Bartholomew is also known as Nathaniel, in John. And Philip he was a friend of Philip. Most of them had a couple of names, 2 or 3 names. Thomas and Matthew, the tax collector, James, the son of Alphaeus, and Lebbaeus, whose surname was Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, who also betrayed him. So why does it say that each present compassion, that they were weary? Well, they were weary from trying to keep the countless little rules and rituals that were pressed upon them by the Pharisees, who were the zealots in the law and who were like hound dogs, hounding the people and accusing them of, but not really offering a pastoral guidance. And so this is why he says they were like sheep without a shepherd. So the dogs were around, but the shepherd wasn't. So what do you get when dogs just start chasing the sheep everywhere? They run around chaotically. So the story of the mission of the apostles is described in similar terms by all the 3 synoptics, except that Matthew gives more detail. That's why we're going to read it in Matthew. We'll read it next time, or the rest of it. Now, they all say that the apostles were given the power to heal illnesses and to expel demons. But Mark adds a couple of important little details. He says, first of all, that they used oil to anoint the sick. That's significant, you see, because, again, we hear in the letter of James, the epistle of James, that when a person gets sick, call for the elders of the church, the presbyters and the priests, to come and pray and anoint the person with oil. So it was already known. They would not have been using this if oil was not associated with healing. And this is why Christ uses this image in the parable of the Good Samaritan, oil and wine, medicinal substances of the ancient world. Yes, well, wine is an antiseptic, and oil is, it soothes the wound. Right, and Mark also mentions that Christ sent out the disciples in pairs. That's interesting. They would support each other. So, let's have a look. All right, we're going to finish off. Our Christ's speech in Matthew, maybe I should be here next time. Otherwise, if we sort of read this preliminary stuff now, it won't be connected with the reading of the gospel material. We are running out of time, so let's just.
You have questions?
You
have questions?
I have a question. All right. Yes.
Why does Jesus tell us to pray to? Why does Jesus tell us to pray to the Lord of the harvest to send laborers when God knows who his good laborers are? What does this prayer help with? That's a good question.
Okay, look, I don't think it's a very complex issue here. Let's have a look what he says again. The harvest truly is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Now, you see, of course, God knows the potential of every human being, right? If the people do want these pastors and leaders to come out and look after them, they need to pray so that God then, it's a kind of it's a synergy. There's no point sending out the laborers, the pastors, if the harvest is not ready. He says that the harvest is ready. So that means, yes, the harvest, the people themselves should pray to the Lord of the harvest to expedite the process, to send out these pastors, okay? So that there is this synergy, so that they express a desire to be led, to be taught, right? And we're going to be talking next time that this mission is limited. Christ tells them specifically not to go out beyond, the lost sheep of Israel. It's only later that he tells them about expanding this ministry from Jerusalem to the whole of Palestine and to Samaria and beyond Samaria to the whole world. All right. I don't know if I've answered the question or made the point, but maybe it's something helpful. You see, I may be repeating this a little bit later, but it's an important thing to understand. Christ was here preparing Israel as a springboard for the evangelization of the whole world, because Israel was the church of the Old Testament, and he chose the best people out of Israel without the preparation, beginning from Abraham, through the patriarchs, through the judges, the king, the kings, the stories of the prophets, all the prophets and everything. There's the church of the Old Testament, that was the people of Israel, you know. This was the congregation, okay? The congregation of Israel. They were, without them, this could not have happened. No point talking to people who are not prepared. And even the people who were the first Christians, you know, the Christians of the apostolic age, they had all heard a little bit about the Bible because they were attending synagogues. Even though they were Gentiles, they were exposed to some knowledge about the Bible. And this is how the apostles managed to make such quick inroads, because these people were already prepared. But the next step was a lot harder. Well, anyway, I won't go into it. Yes, it's a big story, and the story still goes on. All right. Okay, so
you asked about the videos.
Okay. We have 124 videos, but that's no, Chris. That's you're talking about Bible talks.
Yes.
We have 1,900 views and 293 hours. Oh, Lord have mercy.
Only because you asked.
Okay. All right. Now with modern technology, you can pull out these facts and impress people with them. Oh dear. Yes, but look, as I mentioned at the beginning, we will put some sort of a system and some order into these talks. Yeah, it might be useful that way, more useful. All right. It is truly meet to bless the Theotokos ever blessed and most pure, the mother of our God, more honorable than the cherubim, beyond compare, more glorious than the seraphim. Without corruption, they gave us birth to God. The word truth, Theotokos, to be magnified. All right, God willing, Chris, how are you placed for the 19th?
19th is the next.
Is okay. All right, so the 19th. Oh, there's one important thing I wanted to say, and I didn't say it. Look, today we started the preparation for Great Lent, the 3 preparatory weeks, and during Great Lent, we have from the Sunday of Orthodoxy these sessions every Sunday. So Sunday of Orthodoxy, the second Sunday, St. Gregory Palamas, the third Sunday of the Cross, fourth Sunday of John of the Ladder, fifth Sunday of St. Mary. 5 Sundays in a row we'll have these, rather than having them every fortnight. We'll have them every week during Great Lent, because Great Lent is it's a fruitful time. Now, to make it more fruitful, I would really love to invite people to come physically, and maybe Costa, our secretary, remind me to write about it before our next session, so that when we have more people here, look, we'll all get more benefit out of it, because some more questions are generated. We can have slightly longer talks. We're likely to go over the hour mark that we've been keeping, but it's all right. This is an important time of the year, very important time. So let's make the most of the learning experience. Make the effort, come here. You will, especially those who used to come to our Brunswick Theology Group meetings physically. That was a lot of fun to talk face to face. Let's do it. We'll do it in the church. All right.